I never expected life to turn out this way. Not in a bad sense, just in a way that I never fully anticipated. At 40, I was financially secure, working as an online lawyer, able to be anywhere in the world and still make a living. The pandemic had changed everything, but in some ways it had made things easier for me. I didn't need to be in a stiff office. I could take my laptop to a beach or curl up in my own home and still be productive. But despite the ease of my professional life, my personal life had always been a mess. I had wanted to leave my husband many times. He wasn't cruel or violent, just distant, uninspiring. I had married him out of convenience, hoping stability would bring love, but it never did. I stayed because I was kind, because I forgave him every mistake, every indifference. And every time I gathered the courage to leave, he begged me to stay, and I did. But my son Adrian never saw him the way I tried to. Adrian was 20 now, studying in college but still living with us. His stepfather, my husband, had never been a father to him. They coexisted, exchanged occasional pleasantries, but there was no warmth. Adrian had told me countless times that I should leave, that I deserved more, that my husband didn't love me the way I deserved to be loved. And the worst part, I knew he was right. One evening, after my husband had gone to sleep, Adrian and I sat in the living room, watching a documentary about something neither of us really cared about. It was one of those quiet nights where the tension in the house felt heavier than usual. He turned to me suddenly. "Mom, why do you stay with him?" I sighed, staring at the dim glow of the television. "Because leaving is complicated." "No, it's not," he said firmly. "You work online. You make more than enough money. You don't even like him. So why are you really staying?" I turned to look at him, my son, who had always been more perceptive than he should be. He had my sharp eyes, my tendency to observe more than speak. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe I just don't want to be alone." Adrian scoffed, shaking his head. "You're already alone, Mom." Something about the way he said it sent a shiver down my spine. Not because he was wrong, but because he was completely, devastatingly right. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My husband was snoring beside me, oblivious to the silent war I was waging with myself. Adrian's words repeated in my head. "You're already alone." At some point I got up and wandered downstairs, needing air, needing space. I didn't expect Adrian to still be awake, but there he was, sitting at the kitchen table with a book open in front of him. He looked up when he saw me. "Couldn't sleep." I shook my head, pouring myself a glass of water. "Thinking too much." He smirked. "That's dangerous." I sat down across from him, feeling the weight of my exhaustion settle over me. "I don't know what to do, Adrian." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "You do. You just don't want to admit it." For a long moment, we sat there in silence, the quiet hum of the refrigerator filling the space between us. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something shift. Something inevitable, something I wasn't ready to face. But maybe, just maybe, I needed to. The decision didn't come suddenly. It had been building for years, buried beneath every moment of silence. Every night I spent awake wondering if this was all my life would ever be. But something about Adrian's words that night, the certainty in his voice, made everything clear. I wasn't going to stay. I wasn't going to keep living in this lifeless routine, waiting for something to change when I knew, deep down, that it never would. And so I planned, quietly, carefully. I had enough saved up, more than enough. Working online had given me the freedom to be anywhere, to make money without being tied down to one place. There was nothing stopping me. Nothing except the invisible chains I had wrapped around myself. One afternoon, I walked into Adrian's room, closing the door behind me. He looked up from his laptop, raising an eyebrow. "I'm leaving," I said. He sat up straighter. "What?" "I'm leaving him." The words felt foreign on my tongue, but as soon as I said them, I realized how much I loved the sound of it. Adrian blinked, as if processing what I had just said. Then, slowly, a smirk spread across his lips. "Finally." I exhaled a laugh, shaking my head. "You're not surprised." I've been telling you to do this for years, he said, closing his laptop. What's the plan? I hesitated for a moment before saying, we're leaving together. The Canary Islands. Just for a while. He stared at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Admiration. A slow, proud smile formed on his lips. Damn, Mom, he murmured, shaking his head slightly. You're actually doing it. I am, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, watching me like he was seeing me in a new light. That's incredible. You're incredible. A warmth spread through me at his words, unexpected but intoxicating. We were really doing this. We left in the middle of the night. No dramatic confrontations, no last-minute pleas. Just 2 packed suitcases, a silent house, and the quiet thrill of freedom as we stepped into the airport. As we walked through the terminal, Adrian glanced at me with a smirk. I still can't believe you actually went through with it. I rolled my eyes, nudging him playfully. What, you thought I was all talk? Not at all, he said, his tone softer now. I always knew you were capable of this. I just didn't think you'd actually put yourself first for once. I swallowed, glancing away. He wasn't wrong. For years, I had been sacrificing my own happiness, convincing myself that staying was easier. But not anymore. Adrian grabbed my suitcase, effortlessly wheeling it alongside his own. You don't have to do everything yourself, you know, he said. I looked up at him, at the quiet confidence in his expression, the way he carried himself. He had grown up so much. Taller, stronger, more assured. There was something different in his presence now, something more protective. And the way he looked at me, it wasn't just admiration. It was something deeper, something unspoken. I ignored the way my stomach twisted at the thought. The moment we stepped out of the plane, the warmth of the island air wrapped around me, the scent of the ocean filling my lungs. The Canary Islands were everything I had dreamed of. Bright blue skies, golden beaches, and a world away from everything we had left behind. Adrian stretched, rolling his shoulders. This already feels better. I laughed, brushing my hair back from my face. I agree. We checked into a small beachfront villa, nothing extravagant, but beautiful in its simplicity. White walls, wooden accents, and a balcony overlooking the endless stretch of ocean. Adrian stood by the window, taking it all in. You really did this, he murmured, almost to himself. Then, turning to me, he grinned. I'm proud of you, Mom. I exhaled, leaning against the doorframe. Thank you. He took a step closer, his gaze lingering on mine in a way that made my breath hitch for just a moment. No, seriously. I know how hard this was for you. But you did it. You left. You chose yourself. Not a lot of people have the courage to do that. I swallowed, feeling an unfamiliar heat rise in my chest. Well, I had a good reason. His lips quirked. What's that? I smiled softly. You. Something flickered in his eyes at that. Something unreadable. But before I could dwell on it, he reached for my hand, giving it a squeeze. I'm going to make sure you never regret this, he said. You deserve this. You deserve to be happy. For the first time in a long time I believed it. The days passed in a blur of sun-soaked mornings and quiet, peaceful nights. We explored the island together, wandering through cobbled streets and lounging by the beach. It felt like a dream, one that I never wanted to wake up from. But what surprised me most wasn't the island's beauty. It was Adrian. The way he watched me, the way he noticed every little thing. How the ocean breeze tangled in my hair, how the sunlight caught my skin. His compliments came often now, subtle but meaningful. You look really happy, he said one evening as we sat on the balcony, the waves crashing softly below us. I glanced at him. I am. He smiled, but there was something in his eyes. Something warm, something intense. But you should be. There was something unspoken between us now. Something neither of us dared to name. A quiet tension, an awareness that hadn't been there before. I told myself it was just the circumstances, that I was just reading too much into things. But every time his gaze lingered, every time he spoke with that quiet admiration, I felt it. And I didn't know what to do with it. One evening, after a long day exploring the island, we ended up back at the villa, the balcony doors open, the sound of the ocean drifting in. I sat on the couch, my legs tucked beneath me, sipping a glass of wine. Adrian sat beside me, his arm resting against the back of the couch. His body relaxed but his gaze steady on me. "You're different here," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" He tilted his head, considering. "Lighter. Freer. It suits you." I smiled, looking down at my glass. Maybe this is who I was always supposed to be. His fingers brushed against mine, just for a second, but long enough that I felt it. When I looked up, he was watching me with that same unreadable expression. His eyes darker now, more serious. For a moment I forgot how to breathe. And then, just as quickly, he leaned back, exhaling softly. "I'm glad we did this." I nodded, forcing myself to breathe again. "Me too." But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't ignore the truth that was slowly, quietly unraveling between us. Something had changed, and there was no going back. The waves whispered softly against the shore, their rhythmic embrace of the sand soothing and eternal. The sky stretched endlessly above us, a deep canvas of indigo and silver, the stars scattered like scattered dreams waiting to be realized. I had never expected this. Adrian had been secretive all day, urging me to be ready by sunset but refusing to tell me why. "Just trust me," he had said with a knowing smile, his eyes glinting with excitement. And now, standing on the secluded beach, my breath hitched at the sight before me. A soft blanket spread across the sand, surrounded by the gentle flicker of candlelight. A woven basket sat nearby, brimming with carefully packed food and a bottle of deep red wine. 2 glasses caught the moonlight, waiting to be filled. A few feet away, an extra blanket was folded neatly, as if he had thought of everything, even the crisp night air that would soon settle around us. I turned to Adrian, stunned. "You did all this?" His lips curved in a smile, both proud and bashful. "Yeah. I wanted to do something special for you." I swallowed the sudden lump in my throat. "Adrian, this is beautiful. You deserve it," he said simply, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. The wind played with my hair as I stepped closer, touched by the sheer effort and thoughtfulness he had poured into this. I had been taken out to dinner before. Fancy restaurants, carefully curated experiences, but nothing had ever felt like this. Nothing had ever felt this intimate, this real. He pulled out the blanket and motioned for me to sit, and I did, sinking into the softness as he poured the wine with practiced ease. "To us," he said, offering me a glass. I raised an eyebrow. "To us." He smirked. "To our new beginning. To freedom. To the best decision you've ever made." I couldn't help but laugh, shaking my head as our glasses clinked. "You're impossible." "You're incredible," he countered, his voice quiet but firm. The warmth of the wine spread through me, but nothing compared to the warmth of his gaze. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, the gentle lull of the ocean filling the spaces between us. Then Adrian leaned back on his hands, tilting his head to look at me. "You know, I was thinking about something." "That sounds dangerous," I teased, sipping my wine. He chuckled. "Maybe. But really, I was thinking about how different things would be if you never married him. If you'd left earlier. Do you think we'd still be here?" I considered his question, letting my fingers trail over the rim of my glass. "I think," I said carefully, "that everything happens in its own time. Maybe I needed to live through all of that to finally find my way here." He studied me, his expression unreadable. "And are you happy here?" I exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment pressing gently against my chest. "More than I have been in years." A small smile tugged at his lips. "Good." There was something else in his gaze, something deep and unspoken. A quiet reverence, as if he were looking at someone precious. It sent a warmth through me that had nothing to do with the wine. I turned my gaze toward the horizon. "You know, sometimes I feel like we've known each other before." Adrian's eyebrows lifted slightly. Like in another life. Maybe, I mused. Like we were always supposed to find each other. A gentle breeze brushed past us, carrying the scent of salt and something nostalgic, something I couldn't name. He reached for my hand without hesitation, his fingers warm and steady against mine. I think so too. We sat like that for a while, our hands intertwined, the silence between us filled with understanding. At some point, Adrian reached for the extra blanket and draped it over my shoulders. "You're cold," he murmured. I hadn't even realized I was shivering. "Thank you." He wrapped an arm around me then, pulling me against his side in a way that felt natural, effortless. I rested my head against his shoulder, breathing him in, the familiar scent of him warm and steady. I had never felt safer. "You know," he said after a long pause, "I never told you this, but I always hated seeing you unhappy." I swallowed. "Adrian." "No, let me say this," he interrupted gently. "I used to get so frustrated, watching you give and never getting anything in return. You deserved more. You still do." I closed my eyes, absorbing his words. "I'm starting to believe that. You should." His voice was quiet but full of conviction. I turned slightly, looking up at him. His face was close. His features softened by the candlelight, by the gentle glow of the night. His eyes held something deep, something raw. For a moment, it felt as though time had slowed, as though the ocean itself had paused to witness this moment. And then, in the soft hush of the night, Adrian lifted a hand to brush a stray lock of hair from my face. His fingers lingered against my cheek, warm and hesitant. A quiet sigh escaped me as I leaned into his touch, my heart pounding in my chest. "We were always supposed to find each other," he murmured, echoing my earlier words. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the depth of it all. Here, on this quiet stretch of beach, far away from the life I had left behind, I had found something I never knew I needed. Not just freedom, a home. And in that moment I knew I would never let it go.